Hey, folks, it is Election Day, November the 3rd, and we're going to talk a bit about how presidential elections happen. Where does it get its authority from the Constitution? What are the procedures in place? And just the who, what, where, when, and the whys. All right, so no notes today or anything like that, so I'm not going to post anything, but we are going to have discussions. So, oh yeah, another thing. You'll see on the Google Classroom, I posted links. The first two links are to the National Archives. This is a government website that has official documents for the U.S. government, like the Constitution. Go ahead and open up that first one. I'm going to pass around constitutions for the class in here to borrow because we're actually going to use these for today's lesson. So, since I already gave y'all one to keep, I'm just going to let y'all borrow these. I did, but I'm letting you borrow this for in class. So, because I expect many of you left them. Huh? Yeah, I didn't give y'all one of these beginning of this year. No. Just to keep. Yeah, if you don't have one, you can keep it. Then keep it. I could swear I handed all of my classes one of these.
You did.
Yeah, if you don't have one, keep it. Yeah, because it's you got one right here. Yeah, because yeah, well, I guess I did it for other classes. I guess I forgot them. Sorry. Yeah, it was on Constitution Day. Maybe Constitution Day was on 8A. That's probably why I didn't do it. Yeah, if you don't have one, you may keep it. I have extras. So, all right. So, in America, voting has changed over time. So we know that it started out with the states were allowed to pick who voted, but the states unanimously pretty much chose only landowning males who, of course, were from like England, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Europe, like Dutch or France and stuff like that. So it was mostly, like a bunch of white guys who owned land. But the demographics of the nation was very different. There was slave owning, but it wasn't nearly as much as it would be like around the Civil War. We weren't that close to New Spain at the time. So there wasn't a lot of Hispanics in America either. So it was more homogenous in that way. But we're going to see when we talk about the amendments that it will open up across the sexes and the races. So first off, I want you to do something for me. So I put up on the board here, Article 2, Section 1. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. All laws have to be constitutional. That means the Constitution can't go against it. So it's made up of articles, like 5 articles, I think. The first article has to do with the legislature. That's Congress who makes the laws. And the second one has to do with the presidency, the executive branch. I want you to go ahead and open this up. I want you to read Article 2, Section 1. Just that one little section. It's just a couple of paragraphs. And I want you to pay close attention to how presidents are chosen, because we're about to discuss that in just a minute. So read that little section for me, and then we're going to discuss it. So just a little bit of reading today, just a little. You what? You do. There is a salary attached to it. I'm not sure how much it is. I can look. Let's see. To be president.
Washington was paid $400,000 annually. I don't know why he popped up.
Nice. No, that's the current salary, but the first holder of the presidency was George Washington. Yeah, the current salary is $400,000 a year.
Does annually mean yearly?
Mhm.
Is that like a big amount compared to other people, or?
It's like a lot more than me. Yeah, but then they get a stipend afterwards, which is about half that every year. Hey folks, is everybody done or do you need more time? It's kind of old English, right? So, but I think, you're able to make the gist of it. Back then, they didn't have standardized spelling. You learned how to spell phonetically. So like every letter you learned its sound. And so the same person could spell the same word different ways or something like that. It's not going to be till later till they have like Webster's dictionary that you start having standardized spelling across the board, and they start educating like spelling tests and stuff like that.
They still choose
Yep, and that's what they chose. So, all right. So, speaking of that, who picks the people that pick the president? According to this, who picks the people that pick the president? Yeah, Congress. So Congress picks somebody. Who does Congress pick? Electors, yeah. So electors are what we have for what we call the Electoral College. And so the Electoral College, though, is not in the Constitution, but electors are. The Electoral College is essentially the group that decides who the president is. It's something we've developed through tradition. So over time, we've kept this and it's stayed, even though it's not constitutional law. The same with something else, like, say, the Supreme Court. The Article 3 of the Constitution only hints at what the Supreme Court is supposed to do. And it only states that there has to be at least one justice. But by tradition, we've had 9 for a very long time, so we could have an even divide and then a tiebreaker if we need it. So that's why it's 9. Now, so the Electoral College is based on population, and every state gets 3. You get 1 for being a state and one per senator. And every state has 2 senators, so 3 plus some kind of way based on population. So you see the more populous states like Texas, California, Florida, New York, they have a lot of electors. Whenever you have election day, like today, you would have whichever, you would have it based on what we call popular vote. So you see Texas has 38 electors. All 38 electors are supposed to vote in the direction that at least 51% of Texans vote. So 51% of Texans vote this way, these 38 must vote for that person to be president. They vote the other way, must go that way. Occasionally, remember, these people are picked by Congress. You have something called a faithless elector. And that's where, let's say, Texas says this person should be president. 37 vote the way they're supposed to, but one of them's like, I can't do that. They vote the other way. It's rare, but it's been known to happen. If there's an even divide of the electors, How do they break the tie? You just read it.
They pass it to the House of Representatives.
Yes, it goes to the House and they pick what?
The House of Representatives votes for them.
Well, yeah, and they pick 5 people, right, to decide and break the tie. So this kind of thing, this tiebreaker can really be really drawn out. It's a tiebreaker like that ended Reconstruction and pulled federal troops out of the South after the Civil War. But unfortunately, by doing so, that led to like Jim Crow laws and stuff like that. So this is why presidents or presidential candidates go to state trying to get people to vote for them. Because if you take a state, you get all those candidates, all of those electoral votes. And so really, if you just won some of the big states, you would have it all. Now, the magic number to win, though, is at least 270. That's when you've broken past half. But if both candidates got 269, then it would need a tiebreaker. So if you're going to watch this tonight, and the first polls, I believe, close around 5:30 or 6, you can start watching some of the states' numbers come in. It might take time. Some of the states are doing a lot of mail-in ballots, and it might take time for it to be counted. So it might have a week or so before all of the votes are in. But hopefully by the morning, enough will be in and we'll know who wins. If it's too close, if they're too even, it might go to the courts because they might, one candidate or the other might accuse the other of some malpractice, or maybe the polls weren't worked right. So it could come out. It's happened before in the 2000 election, where it went all the way to the Supreme Court. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Now, I think, what else was I going to say? But the reason we have the Electoral College goes back to that Madison quote. It's because It's because the purpose of the Constitution is to protect the minority from the majority. Is the United States made up of the states or made up of the people? Like really, the people? That's a common answer. And this was a big question in the Civil War, because in the Civil War, the South said, when it seceded, that the United States was made up of the states. And they said that's when they had the right to leave the United States and make the Confederacy. The North said it's made of the people and the bond couldn't be broken. The founders probably meant it was a mix of both, really. But see, the way that you protect the minority, these little states, the majority states, with the big populations, is that they all get electoral votes. And that makes all of them important in their own way. Because if it was based only on population, if just like 51% of all of America voted for the presidency, then really only the big cities would pick presidents. California, like LA, and of course, like Sacramento, and of course, like places like that. Of course, like here, it'd be like Austin, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, El Paso, Miami, New York, Chicago. Those cities would pick. The founders, like Madison, studied Roman history, and they saw one of the things that led to Roman corruption when they had a republic like ours is that the only way you could vote in early Roman Republic was to vote in the city. People in the countryside had no vote. And so people in the city were often bribed to vote for one candidate or the other. They're the only ones who it really mattered. And it led to a lot of problems and corruption. So by taking it out of the cities, they were hoping to spread it out and reduce corruption. Do y'all know what we vote on Tuesdays? Well, all right, so the 13 states, really, really, really religious church-going people. So they had a lot of what you call blue laws. And a blue law is like a law that's to keep kind of like Sunday, kind of a clean day, right? So people go to church and stuff. You're not supposed to drink, and you're not supposed to work, you're not supposed to travel. And so when you think about that, back then they didn't have cars. people lived away from the town for the most part, and you could only vote in town. So if you were like a Joe Bob farmer, you go to church on Sunday, then you had to spend all Monday probably packing up things and traveling to town in your little buggy, and that way you could vote on Tuesday, and then you got to travel all the way back home. I mean, they could have picked Wednesday or something, but I don't know. Really, they just picked Tuesday to keep it away from Sunday. So. But yeah, I mean, that's why it's the way it is. And we'll show you one more thing and then we're going to do a little activity. So, if the computer would turn back on. I got it frozen. So, there it is. All right, so, hey, I got this this little graphic thing off of a .gov website. I forgot which one. But this shows like requirements to be president and the pathway to it. So, to be a candidate who's qualified, you must first be a natural born citizen. So a natural born citizen is somebody who one of your parents was an American. So an example of this could be somebody who's born in America, or it could be somebody like, let's say we have a lot of military bases around the world. And a lot of those military bases allow their families to live there. So if you have a couple and one of them or both of them are in the service and they have a baby, their baby might be born in another country like Japan or South Korea, but they're born with American natural citizenship, so they qualify where they could be president. Also, you must at least be 35. They deem that as an age where you knew enough about things. 14 years as a U.S. resident. That means you could go to school abroad, have a business, but then you must come back home and you must at least be here for 14 years so you know enough about the country. And then we are a party-based system. So the two big parties are Republicans and Democrats. Of course, there's a lot of small parties too. You got Libertarians, you got Green Party, you got Socialist Party, you got the Constitution Party, a whole bunch of little parties. But the two big ones that really count are Democrats and Republicans. And so you notice this time, Trump's running again. So his party picked him. They almost always pick what we call the incumbent, the sitting president, if they get to run again. And he chose to keep his same vice president, Mike Pence. However, the Democrats were not in office, so they had to pick somebody to run for presidency. And so that's when you had several people come up, I think it's like a dozen, who said they wanted to be the next Democratic president. And so then they had to campaign and be like, hey, vote for me, vote for me. And then their parties had something called primaries and caucuses. And so in a primary, in a primary, it's like a vote. People just put a name of the person they want to be that party's candidate, put it in a box or vote electronically. It's counted. That person won that county or that state. In a caucus, it's more, the rules can vary from caucus to caucus, but often it's like a big debate. You can have representatives for a candidate go to a group of people and talk them into your side. And it could be anything from a count of hands or how many people are standing on one side of a room. And it's more like where you have people who are undecided and they have a conversation on who they might want to go with. Well, in any case, whoever wins these gets to be that party's candidate. And of course, for the Democratic Party, as we've seen, it's Joe Biden. Then they pick a vice presidential candidate, which was Kamala Harris. And of course, as I said, Trump already had Mike Pence. After that, they go and they campaign to be president. So they go to states that they believe that they could pull over, and they try to convince the local population to vote for them. They will campaign all the way up to today, Election Day. During that time, they normally have a few debates while they're still campaigning. I have advertisements, stuff like that. Early voting starts, it varies from state to state. States get to pick how voting goes, as long as it falls under certain guidelines outlined by the Constitution. But today is the traditional election day. And so this is when a lot of people on their lunch breaks or after work go and vote. And just keep in mind, they have to make that magic number 270. If it's too close, like I said, it could go to the courts. But if you have a landslide for one or the other, then you're going to have a sure victory. And in January, you have the oath of office, and that person is sworn in as president. Now, before we do this last thing, like I told you, the right to vote started out with only a certain niche, a certain group of people. Could y'all open up your little Constitution and look at the 15th Amendment and tell me, what does the 15th Amendment do?
The right to vote won't be taken away from citizens by race or color, or previous condition of society.
Good. Now remember, like you might remember from 8th grade, after the Civil War, we had the 14th, 15th, and 16th Amendment. We call these the Civil War Amendments. And this is when you had the culmination of the war. We had thousands and thousands of people die to end slavery, and they're going to provide rights to a certain group of people, ex-slaves. But the amendment also specifically says men. So this granted all male citizens the right to vote. And so when they were debating this amendment, they specifically said that this was intended for ex-slaves, to integrate them into American society, to have them have the right to vote. So that gets them. Now, why don't you go ahead and look at the 19th, and let's see, you might remember. Does anybody remember? Yeah. Yes, for women. So we talked about that earlier this year. And so we see it expanded to allow women to have the right to vote as well. So now you have all male citizens, all female citizens, and we're going to move on to two more. But what about the 24th Amendment? Can y'all look that one up real quick? 24. The 24th Amendment. Remember, amendment is to change to the Constitution. Constitution, it's hard to change, but it is changeable.
Tax.
What kind of tax?
Poll tax.
Poll tax. Yeah, poll tax is when you have to pay money to vote. Now that's one part of it, but there's another part of this too. So no poll tax, and those were racially motivated. We talked about that. To keep poor black people from voting. So you had to get rid of that. You can't stop people from voting. It's illegal to make it hard for people to vote. But there's one more thing too, and we kind of talked about it. People had the right to do something.
To vote in primary or other election for president.
Yeah,
Blah, blah, blah.
because used to be the parties, the political parties, you basically just have like the guys who run everything smoking cigars in a dark back room, picking who would be the Republican or the Democrat candidate. Now they're making it more to where the ordinary people can have a say so. So can vote, you don't have to write this down, in primaries. So that's going to be a big deal. This is why primaries are so important, because you get to pick who's going to run. And the last one, 26. This one's kind of easy. What's this one? Yeah, 26.
You have to be 18 years old to vote.
Yeah, 18 or older to vote. So that way states can't put restrictions where if somebody's old enough to die in military service, they should also be old enough to vote. That seems fair. And you see, this is an expansion. more and more people get the right to participate in the system. And all of these are done through the amendment process, which is hard. You have to get a super majority of Congress to propose a constitutional amendment. And then you have to get 3/4 of the states to go to a popular vote to ratify it. So then a lot of people vote for it. So now this was done under Reconstruction. So the whole US wasn't put together yet, but this one went through that process. But it was a war that brought this on. A lot of Americans died for this.
Wait, so how old did you have to be before 1971?
It varied from state to state. Some states would be 18, some might be like 20 or 21. So, women. I mean, the crazy thing about this is that it was most states, it was men who voted to have this happen. So we again see Americans willingly expanding the right to vote, and so on and so forth. And Americans voting to get rid of things that had to do with race and secrecy. Americans voting in order to have 18-year-olds vote. But yeah, states get to pick how the voting process goes. So we're gonna do one more thing, but I'm gonna go ahead and end the live stream. So remember, we're gonna come back. This is a B week, so we're gonna meet again on Thursday and Friday. See you later, kids. Now, yes, ma'am.